Bubba Wallace has been eliminated from playoff contention after the Charlotte Motor Speedway, and it all boiled down to a single NASCAR decision that made the 2311 racing driver extremely angry. Although it was safe to say that he had a lot of potential to progress even further, the last race showed that Wallace has matured a lot as a driver, and had it not been for the stop-and-go rule from NASCAR, we would have seen him in the top 8. After his latest statement, NASCAR has a lot of questions to answer. And with Denny Hamlin's latest statement, it seems like Wallace would have a hard time calming himself down and stopping the rant against the sport. The Charlotte Motor Speedway saw Brad Keselowski, Bubba Wallace, Kyle Busch, and Ross Chastain eliminated, and it was definitely one of the most interesting venues of the season so far. However, Wallace had a lot to play for, and although he got knocked out of the round of 12 elimination race, his blistering pace on Saturday promised a lot more before the absurd rules of NASCAR put him out of contention. For the majority of the race, it seemed like Wallace would have been in the top spots of contention and potentially saved his playoff career. But the rule that forces drivers to halt on the front stretch if they miss the entry of the backstretch chicane is something that truly messed up his race. This has to be applied to all drivers, regardless of whether they are going to gain an advantage from it or not. This is why Wallace had to serve a stop-and-go penalty in a similar manner as he was collected in a melee and was sent spinning through the chicane. Wallace has a lot to regret because he was nothing more than an innocent passenger in the incident, one that occurred in the third stage when Daniel Suarez tagged Austin Cindric, who had nothing more to do than turn and spin Bubba Wallace around. Yes, it was something that Wallace could have reacted a lot angrier to, but as he complied with the rules, it was already obvious that his race was compromised, and the number 23 Toyota driver has a lot to say to NASCAR for implementing this rule. Elaborating on this matter, Wallace went on to say, "Honestly, it's such a BS rule. I lost so much track position and I didn't completely come to a stop, but I got blown through the chicane. So I thought I'd just keep the momentum up and get back going, fall back in line, and we can go race it out from there. But we had to stop on the front stretch. We're the only series that does that ass backwards, so not surprised." The race saw his teammate make the transfer into the next round, something that could prompt some questions in the future of 2311 racing, but that is not a topic of today's video. We are going to talk about Wallace's anger and whether or not NASCAR has something to do with the matter, mostly because the 2311 racing driver was running below the cut line when the incident occurred, and it caused a massive change in the tone of the race, putting a halt to his progress through the field. Road courses were not very favorable for Wallace, and that is a fact that was already known, so nobody was really expecting a win or a strong run from the Alabama native. But ever since Saturday went on to show the strong pace of the 2311 racing driver, it became clear to the NASCAR world that anything would be possible during Sunday's race. But despite his bad finish, Wallace has gone on to show that he left his soul on the track, and it was mostly the rule that made him drop so many places and be thrown out of the top 8. During Saturday's practice session, Wallace was the fastest, and he went on to qualify 4th for the race start, although he was 2nd in the first stage of Sunday's race and 7th in stage 2. Nothing could have prepared him for the hit of Daniel Suarez on the 22nd from the 109 laps, and therefore he was forced to do the stop-and-go penalty that he felt very strongly about. Elaborating on this matter, Wallace went on to say, "This weekend was incredible, just from the effort from the team and from myself, just all clicking, right? And it felt really good to be competitive and run up front, pass cars on road courses and not be passed. There's a lot to look at. What I analyze is what could I have done and not be in that situation? Could I have been faster and passed another car? How to be better when you're racing out there with squirrels? It is what it is, just didn't have enough and it wasn't in the cards." One thing I cannot help but wonder is that Wallace has shown great maturity as a driver, and if we are to look at some of the accidents he has had in the past 2 years, his reactions were definitely a lot worse. For example, he pushed and shoved Larson after the Las Vegas accident, and he showed the middle finger to Almirola after the Coca-Cola 600 race this season, so the accident in Charlotte was really tamed from his side. But nonetheless, even if you are not a fan of Wallace, it's really sad to see him eliminated due to a rule that he wasn't really at fault for. This is something that NASCAR really needs to change, because there is not something that these drivers who are caught as collateral damage can do in such situations, and that doesn't really help their race after all. I guess nothing can be predicted during the race, but if you are not an active member of an incident, then your race should not be ruined for being at the wrong place at the wrong time. Wallace's anger would likely continue in the following weeks, and furthermore, it seems like he would be asking the sport to make some changes regarding this rule. But be that as it may, Wallace has shown an extremely good pace throughout the entire weekend, ever since the practice on Saturday started, all up until the crash in the third stage of the race. Nothing could have prepared us for such a strong showing from Wallace, who already felt in danger from being eliminated. And even though his teammate made the playoffs and he didn't, it doesn't mean he is any worse than him. This is something that took the praise of Denny Hamlin, the owner of the Toyota car that Wallace races in. And when talking about this matter, one of the favorites to win the championship this year went on to say that this was probably the best race that Wallace has driven in his career, which only adds more shame to how the race ended in the first place. When asked about how Wallace has matured as a driver and how his last showing in Charlotte was, a race that was not very much to Wallace's liking, Hamlin went on to say, "Let me be a homer here. Bubba did a phenomenal job this weekend. Qualified up front, stage points, both stages, which is hard by the way because you're going to have to come back to the front, and drove back up to 16th. So I thought it was probably the best road course race that he's driven." But apart from the pace and the performance, Hamlin was very surprised by the maturity of Wallace and how he managed to put everyone in awe with his reaction after the Charlotte incident and the rule itself. Continuing to speak on this matter, Hamlin added, just came up short, just not having any playoff points going into the playoffs. It was always going to be stacked against him every round he started. But I think, man, the maturity he showed during that weekend, the great interview he had after the race, just being very matter-of-fact, respectful, and very humble. Great job by Bubba and that team, even though they are not moving on. And even Wallace recognized that the team was not supposed to be here in the first place, so although he has already shut a lot of foul mouths with his playoff appearance in the first place, the fact that he made it into the top 12 helped his team and him to mature to a different level, something with which Wallace is exiting the 2023 season despite the rule that ruined his chance to progress into the top 8. Speaking on this matter, Bubba said, "We weren't supposed to be here according to a lot of people, but we proved them wrong and proved a lot of people in the garage wrong that you can't really count on the 23 in a road course race, right? That's cool to say." But nonetheless, the current rule that forces drivers to halt on the front stretch if they miss the entry of the backstretch chicane, irrespective of whether it was done to gain an advantage or not, is something that will go under heavy review in the foreseeable future. Do you think that Wallace's rant against it will force NASCAR to take some action? And more importantly, do you think that NASCAR will crumble under public pressure? Let us know in the comments below.